There was a time I heard someone or something in my sister's room in the middle of the night, but I still can't explain it. I was around 13 at the time of the incident, and I had a lot of time to waste since it was summer break. And therefore, I decided it would be best to spend my night staying up late in the night to enjoy my summer without the constant noise from my family. Not saying I don't love them, of course. Anyways, it was probably around 12 inches the morning this all took place and was raining pretty heavily outside. I was enjoying my night with the loud rain and my book, and then I heard it. My sister's door leading to the backyard was unlocked by someone. I put my book down before lifting my head to try to listen in better. That's when it began to move things on her desk, which at the time my sister had a lot of pens and pencils and little gadgets on her desk from school, which were all being knocked around. At this point, I started believing it was in my head or noise from the rain, which is when I decided to sit up completely and put my ear to the wall. That's when I heard them. It was two people, a man and a woman. They were speaking in some weird, distorted English that I couldn't make out. That's when I assumed it was my sister and her boyfriend at the time deciding to stay here instead of his place. I sent her a message asking her if she was home. Soon after, she messaged me back saying, "No, she's not." In that moment, I heard her closet door open and her clothes on the hangers began moving around. And before I could hear more, I got more messages from my sister. I picked up my phone and saw she messaged me to go to my parents' room. I knew she was right. So I got up and walked over to my door and began to shake, thinking about needing to pass my sister's room to go to my parents'. I was scared, but I was prepared for whatever was to come. Now, for this next part, keep in mind, any time my sister would leave the house, she always closed her bedroom door. I took a deep breath and opened the door and dashed out, but not before my curiosity won over. I turned my head to the right to then see her door open and what I feel to have been a shadow. I made it safely to my parents' room as I woke them up, and my sister came home with her boyfriend. They checked the back. They noticed the fence had a broken piece with a brick on either side, almost as a stepping stool for something or someone to get over it. They came back into the room as my parents were scolding me, blaming this happening for not praying to God. I wasn't religious at the time, but I sure as heck am now. My sister told my parents that nothing looked out of place and the door wasn't unlocked, nor the windows. I don't know, maybe my sister's room was just haunted. There was always something happening in there. What I do know is my heart and my unease still remains the same as that day's any time I mention this story. Even now, as I write this, my heart feels heavy and my throat feels swollen shut. But I just needed to get this out. Thank you for listening to my real story. And please, if you know what I heard, let me know. I did not start writing on Reddit because I wanted attention. That is the lie people tell when they want to feel clean about their compulsions. I started because it was the only place I could put a thought down and walk away without it following me home. Or so I believed. At first, the routine was harmless. Just a throwaway account. Late nights and the soft glow of a laptop illuminating an unmade bed. I worked a monotonous remote job and lived alone in a town built to be passed through rather than lived in. When the workday ended, the silence came on thick and heavy. Writing filled the empty space. Writing kept the walls from listening. I gravitated toward the horror subreddits because they offered a brutal honesty. The readers there understood dread, not the theatrical frights, but the slow, creeping rot that settles deep in your chest and refuses to leave. My early posts were small observations. A man who waved every night from the edge of a cornfield. A voicemail that played rhythmic breathing only when rewound. The comments were kind and encouraging, with familiar usernames popping up to offer praise. Then I wrote, "The Quiet Neighbor," and the atmosphere shifted. It was a first-person story about a man whose neighbor stands in the exact same spot outside his house every night, lingering just beyond the reach of the porch light. Never moving, never closer, never gone. I kept the prose restrained, offering no clean explanations and letting the reader sit in the raw uncertainty. It performed exceptionally well. Front page, thousands of upvotes, and a flood of messages asking if it was based on true events. Answering those messages was my first mistake. I replied casually, "Thanks, just fiction." Inspired by a mood, nothing more. I went to bed writing the euphoric high writers get when a piece truly connects. The next morning, a lone notification waited for me. A new comment, posted at 3:12 a.m. No username, just deleted. He likes the dark between the porch light and the street. I shrugged the notification away. It was a creepy addition, par for the course in a community where readers love to play along. But the phrasing lingered like a foul smell. Not the neighbor, not a general subject, just he. Familiar, utterly specific. I did not respond. The following night, another comment appeared under the same post. Still deleted, with the identical cadence and calm certainty. He can see you through the screen door. The timestamp read 3:12 a.m. I blamed an insomniac troll with a flair for theatrical timing. The internet breeds them. Still, I locked my doors that night, more out of ritual than genuine fear. I began cataloging the ambient sounds of the house. The refrigerator kicking into gear. The wind pressing heavy against the vinyl siding. A solitary car passing on the road out front. Nothing more. A few days later, I posted a new piece. A completely different premise about a woman who hears phantom typing from an empty office down the hall. The standard praise rolled in. Then, buried halfway down the thread, sat another comment from deleted. The typing stops when you hold your breath. Timestamped at 3:12 a.m. Cold pooled at the base of my throat. I scoured my profile, dissecting years of posts and comments. I had never shared a location, a name, or a photograph. The oppressive weight of being watched settled over me anyway. I blamed coincidence, primarily because the alternative required believing the impossible. 2 weeks passed in agonizing slow motion. I tried to ignore the threads, but the compulsion always won. The comments never addressed the plot directly. Instead, they dissected my structure, my pacing, and the precise details I chose to omit. Always deleted. Always 3:12 a.m. I began sleeping with the laptop firmly closed shut. Then, The power grid failed. No storm warning preceded it, and the lights did not flicker before dying. Total darkness swallowed the room. The town possessed cheap infrastructure and old lines, making blackouts common. I grabbed my phone, engaged the flashlight, and navigated the hallway to check the breaker panel. The smell hit me first. Damp earth and freshly turned soil. It had no place inside a dry house. I stood absolutely motionless in the dark. The floorboards groaned as the temperature dropped. Somewhere, deep in the walls, water moved through copper pipes. I blamed the natural odors of an aging foundation. When the power returned, I stepped away from the keyboard entirely. I needed space to let my racing mind settle. In the absence of new stories, the direct messages began. Private texts from accounts with empty icons and deleted usernames. "We miss your words." I blocked the account. The platform simply replaced it with another. I tested the carbon monoxide detector and swapped the batteries just to be certain. I researched paranoia symptoms and slammed the browser shut before reading the results. Then came a small detail, something I wish I had missed. In The Quiet Neighbor, I described the protagonist's house as having a cracked third step leading up to the porch. It was meant to be texture, simple atmospheric set dressing. The next morning, I walked outside to collect the mail. The third step of my own porch now bore a fresh, jagged hairline fracture. I crouched and traced the fissure with my index finger. The concrete felt cold and entirely unremarkable. I laughed out loud at my own unraveling mind. That night, at 3:12 a.m., a single notification awoke the dormant thread. Concrete shifts when the ground is disturbed. I stopped laughing. I began meticulously documenting everything. Dates, exact times, digital screenshots. Yet every time I reviewed the files, the data had mutated. A crucial image missing. A timestamp shifted by an hour. A digital note I had no memory of drafting, written in my exact authorial voice. One entry sat alone in a blank document. "He doesn't like when you check the windows twice." I wiped the drive clean. The following afternoon, the latch on the bathroom window sat open. It requires a specific, forceful jiggle to unlock, and I check it religiously every night. I sat on the porcelain edge of the bathtub and stared at the latch. The glass offered only a warped, pale reflection of my own face. Desperation pushed me back to the keyboard. I avoided fiction and posted a purely analytical essay on the mechanics of writing fear, arguing that the unknown holds more power than the explicit. It felt safe and detached. The first comment arrived almost instantly. "We are not the unknown." Time-stamped at 3:12 a.m., I slammed the lid down. My hands shook violently. No more rationalizing. I drafted a frantic message to the forum moderators, detailing the patterns, the exact timestamps, and the undeniable escalation. They responded with polite sympathy, suggesting that obsessive trolls often latch onto rising creators. They advised me to step back, mute all notifications, or simply delete the account. Erasing my digital identity felt like a potent mixture of grief and salvation. I hovered the cursor over the deletion prompt for 10 full minutes. Before I could click, one final direct message arrived. "You cannot delete us." That was the moment the floor gave way entirely. The plural pronoun severed my last tether to logic. I deleted the account. The platform logged me out, the page refreshed, and the pseudonym vanished. The resulting silence felt clinical and wrong, much like a room stripped of furniture, where only the heavy indentations remain in the carpet. I went to bed early and slept in fractured bursts. At exactly 3:12 a.m., my eyes snapped open. No noise woke me, only the absolute certainty that the atmosphere in the house had shifted. I lay paralyzed, regulating my breathing to listen. A wet, soft rhythm resonated from just beyond the exterior wall. Not footsteps. It was slow, patient respiration pressed directly against the vinyl siding. I refused to check the window. The scent of damp earth permeated the drywall. By morning, barefoot impressions ruined the soil in the front flower bed. Deep, heavy, and facing the house. The responding police officers took unenthusiastic notes. They asked standard questions regarding enemies, narcotic use, and occupational stress. They suggested a security camera to ease my nerves. I installed 3 that afternoon, covering the front yard, the back door, and the blind side of the house. Night fell, and I sat paralyzed at the kitchen table, obsessively monitoring the live feeds on my phone. At 3:11 a.m., the perimeter remained secure. At 3:12 a.m., the front camera feed fragmented into static. When the picture stabilized a second later, a figure occupied the absolute edge of the frame. It stood far back, perfectly positioned where the artificial light bled into the dark. The resolution offered no facial details, but the unnatural stillness commanded the screen. The digital timestamp flickered once before the entire feed froze completely. The next morning, the application classified the footage between 3:12 a.m. and 3:20 a.m. as a corrupted file. I packed a single duffel bag and drove blindly to a decaying motel 2 towns over, leaving every light in the room burning bright. I promised myself the retreat was a temporary measure to regain perspective. The local wireless connection proved agonizingly slow. Yet, at 3:12 a.m., my phone vibrated on the cheap nightstand. A push notification alerted me to a new submission. It was published under my deleted username. The title read, "The Writer Who Tried to Leave." I opened the link with trembling fingers. The prose mirrored my exact voice, matching my rhythm and my disciplined restraint. Clean sentences with controlled, rough edges. The text described this exact motel room. It detailed the neon sign flickering outside the window and the lingering odor of industrial bleach masking stale tobacco. It cataloged the contents of my unpacked bag and mocked the way my hand unconsciously drifted toward the deadbolt. Then, the narrative shifted. It described the tall, unmoving shape occupying the bathroom doorway just outside my peripheral vision. It detailed how the thing waited in perfect silence for the precise moment I would look up from the screen. The story ended mid-sentence. I did not turn around. Blood hammered against my ribs as I stared at the glowing screen for what felt like hours. When my muscles finally obeyed, I kept my eyes locked forward, grabbed the keys, and ran out the door. I am typing this manuscript from an undisclosed location. I refuse to name the city. I refuse to document the date. I no longer check the time. I no longer write fiction. I document this reality instead. Whenever I stop typing, The air in the room grows thick, as if the dark is waiting for absolute silence to make its final move. If you happen to read this at 3:12 a.m. and a cold familiarity settles over your skin, if you entertain the brief, terrifying thought that this is not merely a story, that is not paranoia. That is pacing, and it knows you are here. I know most stories on Reddit are fake. I usually think the same thing when I read them. But this one isn't. I wish it was. In 2022, I joined the military. Before that, I had never experienced sleep paralysis. Not once. No night terrors, no shadow people, nothing. The first time it happened was in A school in Gulfport, Mississippi. Builder school, just a random weeknight. My roommate and I went to sleep around 10 p.m. He had been playing video games. I had been studying until I knocked out. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up facing the wall. I couldn't move. My entire body was locked in place. I could hear him snoring on the other side of the room. Our desks were pushed together to form a divider between our beds, so I couldn't see him, but I could hear him clearly. My bed was near the sink and bathroom. His was near the window. I knew exactly where he was, and I knew he wasn't the one in my room. I felt eyes on me. Not imagined, not a vague feeling. Eyes. My whole body went cold, like I'd been caught doing something I wasn't supposed to. A heavy, paralyzing dread settled over me. I felt like someone was standing on the other side of my bed, just watching. I was so afraid I stopped breathing. I thought if it was a real person, if someone had come into the room, maybe I could play dead. Maybe they'd leave. Holding my breath forced my body to jerk itself out of the paralysis for a split second. Enough to confirm I couldn't move voluntarily. Enough to know the fear was real. The logical part of my brain tried to rationalize it. Sailors assigned to watch over students had key cards. We shared a bathroom with the room next door. It wouldn't be impossible for someone to be standing there. So I prepared myself. If this person attacked, I'd fight. I stayed still so long that eventually exhaustion pulled me back to sleep. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't experience it again for months. Then, late 2022, after I was stationed in Virginia, it happened again. Different barracks, older base, first floor. This time, I had a room to myself. Same feeling, same presence, facing the wall again. Something standing just out of sight on the other side of the bed. The next morning, I mentioned it casually to some coworkers. One older sailor overheard. He used to live in those barracks. He pulled me aside and told me he'd felt the same thing there. He told me to put a salt circle around my bed and pray. I would have assumed he was messing with me, but he wasn't even part of the conversation. He just overheard and looked genuinely unsettled. In 2023, we detached to Romania. This was the worst one. 4 of us got put in a separate hotel because we booked the detachment last minute. I went to sleep at a normal time. We had work the next day. I woke up and was immediately paralyzed. I held my breath until I broke free enough to look up. There was something in the room. It's hard to describe. Not a detailed figure, more like an outline, a darker shape inside the dark, standing right next to my bed. The second I focused on it, it lunged at me. I woke up, still in bed, still paralyzed. I held my breath again, looked up. It was there. It lunged. I woke up again. This repeated over and over. Lunge, wake, lunge, wake. I could feel my real body trapped underneath it all. My real eyes shut, my chest burning because I was intentionally restricting my breathing to break the paralysis. Every time I almost forced my eyes open, it would lunge again. Finally, I managed to pry my eyes open. The room was empty. I stayed awake the rest of the night on FaceTime with my girlfriend. Different time zone. She stayed up with me until about 3 a.m. my time. I eventually passed out from exhaustion. At 6:15 a.m., my coworker was shaking me awake. We were supposed to be downstairs at 6 a.m. I rushed to get ready and asked her if she had asked the hotel to open my door to wake me up. She said my door was already open when she got to my floor. Wide open. Like that all night. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd left it open in my sleep. Maybe I was losing it. The next big incident was in early 2025, overseas again. Different hotel. I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of the doorbell. Loud, clear. It shook me awake. I assumed it was a prank. I waited a bit, then checked the hallway. No one there. It started happening randomly. Not every night, but enough that I got paranoid. One night it rang again, and I sprinted to the door. Opened it immediately. Empty hallway. I accused a coworker I wasn't close with. Thought maybe he was knocking and running back to his room down the hall. I confronted him. He looked genuinely confused. Told me I sounded crazy. So I went to the front desk and asked them to check the cameras. Later that day, they called me back. IT had reviewed everything. They said they saw me running to the door multiple times across several nights. Opening it, looking out, but they never saw anyone in the hallway. No one ringing, no one near my door. By 2026, I'd mostly convinced myself it was stress, anxiety, sleep issues. I made rank, moved out in town, lived alone. Things were quiet for a while. Until this week, I woke up to the sound of something running up my stairs. Not a dream, not muffled, actual footsteps on the stairs in my place. Then my bedroom door opened. I couldn't move. Something ran to the edge of my bed. I could hear it breathing, standing there. I pretended to be asleep. I was too afraid to move. After a few seconds, it walked away. I heard it leave, heard the door close. My body finally unlocked, and I sat there shaking, ice cold. The next day, while I was doing dishes, I noticed my neighbors through the window across the way. They were arguing. The woman kept gesturing toward my place. Panicked. The guy was pacing, pale, hands on his head. For a second, I wondered if she'd caught him sneaking into my place. But then I realized I never heard my front door open. I have a ring. It would have notified me. The back door creaks loudly. I would have heard it. They noticed me watching. The argument got louder. She started yelling that they needed to tell someone, that they needed to call the police. They saw something. Something disturbed them deeply from my house. They moved out a couple days later. The corpsman put me on anxiety medication to help me sleep. It's been quiet for a few days. Nothing new has happened. But my contract ends soon. I'm going home, and I'm genuinely afraid this is going to follow me there. If you've had experiences like this, I need to know. I don't know if this is normal sleep paralysis, stress, or the beginning of something worse. I don't know if I'm losing my mind.